Hello, and welcome to another episode of Undercooled. Today, we have Cindy Anderson, who's one of the founders of Engineering for One Planet, which is an amazing resource for materials educators because it allows you to put in modules about sustainability right into your existing courses. But it'll be much more interesting to hear Cindy talk about it than me. So let's start by asking Cindy, who are you? How did you get involved with all this stuff?
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me, Steve and Tim, inviting me to be on this podcast. This is my first time doing a podcast, so I hope I'll do okay. And also, I just want to say thank you to all the listeners that are tuning in. I appreciate you taking the time to spend with us and learn about Engineering for One Planet. So who am I? Well, I won't tell you my whole long, convoluted story about how I ended up here, but I'll tell you a little bit about it. I grew up on a very small farm in southern Ontario, Canada, and that's where I really learned to live sustainably. And it wasn't for the environment necessarily, it was because we didn't have a lot of money. So I learned to be very frugal from my parents, learned to garden, preserve food, all that sort of thing. And I also really fell in love with the natural world by growing up on that farm. I had a lot of free time to, play in creeks and play in the woods and whatnot. And I really fell in love with the natural world that way. And so from there, I actually went to school for biology and also education. So that's really my educational background. I'm a biologist and an educator. I'm not an engineer, so for full disclosure to your listeners about that. And really, I had this very strong desire to go to the Canadian Arctic. I had learned about the Arctic kind of my whole childhood, and I became kind of obsessed about getting to the Arctic. And so what I ended up doing was back in 1998 was my first time getting the chance to work in the Arctic after I graduated from my undergrad in biology. And that really set my career off in one direction, which was to study seabirds, of all things. So I spent a lot of time I spent a lot of time in the Canadian high Arctic as well as the Antarctic, kind of going back and forth, studying climate impacts in the form of extreme weather events on seabirds and their ability to raise their young and find food. And basically I spent like 10 months of the year in the field. I would go to the Arctic for 4 months, have a month off, 6 months in the Antarctic, and repeat. And that's kind of a convoluted story for where I ended up today, because I basically was doing that for so many years. I'm doing the research, publishing, presenting at conferences, but it felt really frustrated when I was just being engaged with my community and seeing what was happening all around the planet. It really felt like nothing was changing. So I really felt kind of frustrated that I was going to these beautiful places, seeing glaciers calving and the environment changing, flooded nests in the Antarctic in the summer, which is just, it's hard to comprehend that. And so I ended up having this sort of aha moment. I had an opportunity to hear Janine Benyus speak. I'm not sure if your listeners are familiar with Janine Benyus, but she's the author of a book that was published in '97 called Biomimicry Innovation Inspired by Nature. And that's all about taking design inspiration and functional designs and applying it to human designs. And so I had this epiphany. Oh, wait, what if I could take all of my knowledge of biology and the natural world and help those people that are building and designing and coding our world to create more sustainable designs? So that's when I started working at the Biomimicry Institute. I was one of the first hires at that nonprofit, and my job there was really to launch a university education program. So that's when I really started working with faculty in the discipline of engineering, but also architecture, business, and all STEM fields. So it was a really exciting time. And one of the things that we did while I was there was to launch a 2-year professional certificate in biomimicry, and that's now a fully online master's in science program in biomimicry at Arizona State University. From there, I ended up going to the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, and I launched the world's first fully online multidisciplinary master's in sustainable design. And that was really exciting. It's a program that's continuing on today. But through these experiences, I really started to work more and more with engineers and really started to understand the amazing and deep and profound impacts that engineers have, for good or not so good, impact on our environment and our society. So really, I see engineers as being one of the most powerful and important professions that we have today. And that's because engineers are the ones that build and code and design and streamline our operations for really everything that we buy and consume and throw away. So I really kind of switched my trajectory and in my career and really started to focus on trying to help engineers do their job in a way that has the best impact for our environment and society. And I did want to just share too that that's a lot about my sort of professional background. Before I started working with the Lemelson Foundation to launch Engineering for One Planet. But I also am deeply personally committed to sustainability. I grow most of my own food. I'm an avid backpacker. I love to sail. I also am a skier. And all of those things are actually severely impacted by climate change. And I live in Montana now, in Missoula, Montana. And even over the 2 decades that I've lived here, I see massive changes in my own backyard. Glaciers are shrinking. I need more water to raise my food. Snowpack is dissipating, so it changes our wildfire season every year. And then sailing, we have much more extreme weather events to face when sailing. But I share these because it's personally important to me as well, and I think for a lot of your listeners, it's probably very important to them on a personal level, sustainability, especially your students or potential students. So I wanted to share that because I think making that connection to why we are doing these things, not just from a professional standpoint, but a personal standpoint, is important. And the things I just shared about what I like to do, those are all personal choices. There are many billions of people in the world that they're not making these personal choices. Their homes are being flooded. There's a lot of things that are happening in the world. They can't grow their food due to drought. And so there's a lot of climate refugees now. So just sharing that there's a lot going on in the world. It's not all about climate change. There's a lot of other things to be concerned about. But engineers do have a massive influence on that. And I wanted to share one other thing that, I won't go over all the stats of like how sea level is rising, and our global temperatures are rising. Last year was the hottest year on record, apparently, in the last 2,000 years. I won't go all through all those stats, but I do want to share that Engineering for One Planet is a place to start to make changes. It's an easy way for educators to get interested and engaged in sustainability, bring it into their classrooms. I just read last week in the New York Times that 62% of adults in the U.S. say they feel a personal sense of responsibility to help reduce global warming, but 51% say they don't know where to start. So I just share with you that Engineering for One Planet is a perfect way to start, even if it's changing one project or one module within your courses and programs. It's a perfect way to start.
That is such a great story to hear, and also to make that point early on about anything you can do. However you get started, here's a place to start, but doing anything, is always going to be preferable to saying, well, I wish I could do something. As you were talking, you mentioned the Lemelson Foundation, and I know that's connected to the work that you're doing. So could you talk about that foundation a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Lemelson Foundation is a small family foundation that's located in Portland, Oregon. And I've been working with the Lemelson Foundation since 2017 to really start. It started off as a research project, but what then eventually grew into Engineering for One Planet, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later. But the Lemelson Foundation was started by Jerry and Dorothy Lemelson, and I'm not sure if your listeners know who Jerry Lemelson is or not, but he was one of America's most prolific independent inventors. So he had over 600 patents to his name. And the Lemelson and so he and his wife started the foundation because they were really interested in having engineers in particular, but anybody to really feel that they had the opportunity to invent and innovate and bring their ideas to market. And so their mission, the Lemelson Foundation's mission, is improving lives through invention. And so people might not see the direct connection between Engineering for One Planet and that mission. But in fact, because the Lemelson Foundation has been around for over 25 years, they've really supported a lot of innovation and entrepreneurship and invention, and really helped to shift how invention and innovation is being brought into K through 12 as well as higher ed. But through those years, they started to think about, well, what's the impact of all of these inventions in the world? And so back in 2017, myself and another colleague were commissioned to do a study to look at sustainability and how it's being integrated into programs around the world. And that's really what kicked off the beginnings of Engineering for One Planet.
That's great. So do you think you could tell us what Engineering for One Planet actually is, and how does it work?
Great. Right. So I've been mentioning this, Engineering for One Planet. Excuse me. So I've been, mentioning Engineering for One Planet over and over again already, and I haven't told you what it is. So the vision of Engineering for One Planet is that sustainability will become a core tenet of the engineering profession, no matter what discipline of engineering people are from. And our goal is to transform engineering education so that every engineer is equipped to design, build, and create with environmentally and socially sustainable ways. And so I'm going to tell you a lot about Engineering for One Planet today, and I just want you to know that you can go to our website, engineeringforoneplanet.org, and everything I'm talking about today you can find on our website, as well as a lot more than what I'm going to share with you today. But all of the resources I'm talking about, every opportunity that I'll be sharing with you, you can find out about on our website.
All right. So with Engineering for One Planet being this sort of change agent and hoping to get all engineers doing sustainable design, doing sustainable work, and learning that hopefully early in their education, I think you've already done a good job of telling us why out in the world, these engineering decisions are having impacts. But why is it that we need to change engineering education? What's the connection here?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. And I will just say that changing any higher ed education is very difficult. And then to think about changing all of engineering education, shifting that, it's a really audacious goal. We know that, and we know it's going to be a difficult thing to do. But there is a great need, not just because of the climate change impacts that I mentioned earlier, or all these other issues that we're challenges that we're facing as a population and as a planet. But we, as I mentioned before, engineers are the ones that really are building and coding and designing all the things that we buy and consume and throw away. So they have this potential impact, either positive or negative, on people and the environment. And so it's just really important that engineers get trained to understand how to measure their impacts and understand how to make decisions, decisions that involve these trade-offs. And the issue there, though, is that most engineers are not trained in sustainability at all. So we know we graduate about 140,000 engineers in the U.S. every year. That's just the U.S. And we know that environmental engineering is really the only engineering discipline that is committed in a concrete way to introducing sustainability concepts and tools throughout all levels of the 4-year program in undergrad for engineering. And so when you look at the percentage of environmental engineers that are graduating every year, it's about 1% of the 140,000 that are graduating each year. So we have a massive opportunity here to influence how students are trained and then therefore their impact after they graduate. Another reason why it's important to change engineering education to integrate sustainability is that it's an imperative for our students and for our youth. So kids today understand the impacts of climate change. They might not understand exactly how it's happening, or they probably understand that it's human caused, but they know that the world is changing and it's scary for them. And they're really asking for ways to help. Even the youngest of kids are asking that. And students, we're hearing more and more all around the world that students are demanding to learn how to face climate change impacts in their professions and how to understand sustainability. So just a few quotes that I wanted to share with you from recent studies. So there was a study that was put out in 2022 that said 91% of students interviewed want to make a difference in their job. So integrating sustainability into materials education would be so profound because it means that students would be able to graduate and feel like they have a purpose in their job, not just in making different materials and changing materials, but also what they're doing to influence the planet and our people. That same study said 86% of students said it was vital that the company that they work for has a positive environmental impact. That's massive. If more than the majority of students are actually saying that they care whether or not the company they're working for is actually doing something positive for the planet. And then the other thing I'll share is that back in 2017, I did a small study, work with students that were engineers and entrepreneurs. And I did a small survey with these students. And 70% of those students that were in engineering and entrepreneurship said sustainability was of utmost importance to them, yet 60% hadn't considered the environmental impacts of their product or service in their designs because they didn't know how to. So we can see that there's this amazing opportunity of all these engineers that are not getting exposed to sustainability and this incredible demand from the students themselves that want to know how to do this work better. Lastly, I'll just share that sustainability is an imperative for industry. So we're not only facing a looming shortage, but a growing shortage of people with green skills. So a report that was put out just last year said that the skills gap in the green economy will rise to 7 million jobs by 2030. So we're facing this massive gap in supply and demand for students that are graduating that actually have the skills to be able to move into the green economy.
You know, a conversation I often have with students as they're graduating and they're getting ready to look for jobs or, accept their first job really ties together your last 2 points nicely, which is that students are saying, who do I work for? I don't want to work for the evil super mega corporation that's destroying the planet, but also I need to get a job, right? And I think students don't realize often how valuable they are and how much companies want them, right? That they're the resource being sought. It's not their job to grovel to employers and say, please take me. It's their job to say to the employers, prove to me that you want me. And having our students better equipped with this sort of knowledge of how much demand there is and how broad this gap is between supply and demand for engineers with these skills really could hopefully get them to understand that they are a very valuable resource that they're being competed for. So I hope we can get that across.
Yeah, and I'll just pile on to that and say Absolutely. They're this valued resource for industry. And actually, with Engineering for One Planet, we're working with a number of different companies that are struggling right now to not only do they want the students that are that are graduating from programs now, but they actually have this whole engineering workforce that needs to be retooled. So we're talking about building micro-credentials. We're talking about how do we upskill these existing engineers so that they can shift over and do sustainability-focused work. Industry has made massive commitments, not only to the people, their customers, but also in some cases federally. So they're really facing this extreme issue, this extreme problem that they're trying to solve, but also related to students being valuable and their voices being important to be heard is not just from industry. I really want to point out that universities are businesses too. A lot of people forget that colleges and universities are businesses. They need students to pay tuition, to come into their programs and to learn and hopefully graduate and get great jobs, because that's important for them to attract students. So I just really want to underscore that the student demand is highly important for universities and university programs such as materials engineering to really think about and consider when they're trying to capture new students to come into their programs and become tuition-paying customers. I'm not saying that we need to kowtow to every single thing a student says they want, but this is an overwhelming majority of students that are looking for this kind of training. And so the smartest, most savvy businesses, including universities, will be shifting their programming. And we're also seeing some early data with our Engineer for One Planet work that not only is it helping to attract new students, but in particular, it's helping to attract those students that typically don't go into engineering. So more women, more underrepresented groups. And that's something that schools are struggling with too. We really want to bring in all these different people that are part of the conversation. They're part of our community. They need to be part of the solution. So yes, thank you for underscoring that point and really giving me the opportunity to kind of dig a little bit deeper on that.
And so as we talked about on other occasions, the whole field of material science and engineering has suffered for over 50 years with the problem that many people, especially parents and students, don't understand who we are and what we do and how central materials are to everything we make. And it's especially central to everything with sustainability, because while we solve one problem, we often create other problems with our materials. And so plastics are wonderful things. Too bad we make too many of them and have way too much of an excess of plastics in our waste stream, and they don't recycle very well. In fact, it's well known that the petroleum industry has provided a lot of disinformation about recycling with the little numbers they put. And very, very few plastics right now today can actually be recycled. And when you talk to the plastics manufacturers, they say it's not a problem, you just bury it. And that may be one approach, but there's got to be better approaches. And so I think that the whole materials community needs to change the way we teach and make sure that we're getting the message out that material science offers the potential to solve a lot of these sustainability problems, all the way from energy by developing better batteries, by making lighter, stronger materials that reduce the weight that has to be transported, which reduces energy, by materials for desalination, because water resources are really critical for our survival. And the very essence of engineering is that engineering has always been dynamic. It's always had to change to meet the challenges we face as humans. And I'm teaching a course right now with an archaeology professor where we teach what the impact of materials has been on society going back to the Stone Age and before. And This repeats over and over and over. And, especially with the onset of the Industrial Revolution, Malthus would, predicted how London would be 10 feet deep in what horses produce as the number of horses kept increasing. And it was engineering and the Industrial Revolution that bailed them out, because we developed cars and trucks and motorized vehicles and eliminated the need for horses. And then we were running out of arable soil to grow crops. And it was after we fought wars over, guano in South America, we finally used all that up too. And it wasn't until the Haber-Bosch process to convert nitrogen gas into ammonia that we were able to make fertilizer and save the planet. And so ultimately our problem is we have too many people. And how sustainable of a planet can we be if we have too many people? But we have to believe that we can solve this problem without getting rid of people with engineering. So I'd argue that this is adding sustainability to materials curricula and changing the way we teach may be one route to solving this really existential problem of how are we going to survive in the future. So boy, is it important. And it's always hard to change. But I want to hear more about how engineering for one planet can actually do it. What are the details? Can you give us some examples of the modules and how you've made it easy for faculty to just insert a module right into their existing course?
Yeah, I'm happy to describe what we're doing. I'd love to walk you through actually the 3 different approaches that we're taking with Engineering for One Planet to create systems change in engineering. I really want to underscore that we understand that to change engineering education, that it is really a systems level challenge. It's one thing to change a course here and there, which we completely encourage and we support in all these different ways. But really what we're looking to do is fundamentally change the system so that really that all engineers are graduating with these skills in their tools in their toolbox. So we're using a lot of different approaches that combine bottom up and top down methodologies. And in particular, we've settled on, since the launch of Engineering for One Planet in 2020, we've landed on 3 different interrelated approaches to affect this systems change in engineering education. The first is that we've been developing and sharing resources through community contributions and vetting. So I'll be telling you about all these different resources that include the learning outcomes that Steve was just talking about to integrate into your classes. And then we also, our second interrelated approach is to fund faculty change efforts and support capacity building efforts with our faculty. And then lastly, we're trying to activate and support collaboration across diverse stakeholders, which includes across sectors. So just diving into the first approach, the community co-created resource, and I really wanted to underscore the fact that these are community co-created. So even though the Lemelson Foundation has been supporting the Engineering for One Planet initiatives since 2020, since its launch, really every single thing that we create is created with a community of people. So I led the development of the EOP, what we call the EOP framework, or Engineering for One Planet framework, as well as the companion teaching guides. But we had people from across sectors, from across geographies, lived experiences, disciplines, really weigh in on what should be in these resources. So the EOP framework in particular has nearly 200 contributors to it. All of these resources, as I said before, you can find them on our website. We have a resources page. Everything is for free. Everything's downloadable. They're meant to be used in e-form, so electronic form, don't need to print them in order to use them. And they're in the Creative Commons. So I do want to really stress the fact that anything that you see that's available on our website, these resources you can take and you can pick and mix. You can take what you want, leave what you want. You don't need to use anything in its entirety. It's not meant to be prescriptive. Sometimes people see our EOP framework and they say, oh my gosh, there's so many learning outcomes. How would I ever possibly do this? It's not intended to be used as a prescriptive Bible to follow. Instead, it's meant to be inspirational. It's meant to help faculty figure out, oh, I can do this one thing. Here's an outcome that I can put into my classroom. And so I'll talk a little bit more about the framework itself. As I said, it's available on our website. You can download it for free. But it's a vetted menu of 93, if you can believe that, student learning outcomes that cross core and advanced. They're core and advanced learning outcomes that run across 9 different topic areas. And the 9 different topic areas, we have a visual that's a wheel or a circle, and in the center of that is systems thinking. And that's because our community really believes that systems thinking is at the heart of everything we do related to sustainability and engineering. But the other 8 disciplines cross sustainability-focused skills and tools, and then also professional and leadership skills and tools, because, again, our community really believes that in order to affect change, you can't just have technical skills. You also need to be able to work across disciplines. You have to be able to work in teams. You need to know how to communicate. You need to be a critical thinker and problem solver. So the 8 other topic areas, in addition to systems thinking, are environmental literacy, responsible business and economy, social responsibility, environmental impact assessment, materials selection, design, and then critical thinking and communication and teamwork. And so most obviously for your materials engineers that are listening to this podcast, the material selection topic area is probably where you would start to look at student outcomes and integrate into your courses. And you can take a look at this resource online and dive into it. But I do want to underscore that really every course and every program has the opportunity to integrate outcomes from across the entire 9 different topic areas. So you might really easily be able to see how environmental impact assessment would fit into materials engineering. You might very easily be able to see design and critical thinking and how that fits into materials engineering, as well as responsible business and economy and all the rest of them. So we really started the Engineering for One Planet, like I said, in 2020. And the EOP framework is what we call the cornerstone of our EOP initiative. And that's because it's really at the heart of everything that we do. It's really meant to simplify curricular change, from the smallest, integration to change one project or to change an entire course or perhaps change an entire degree program. And we have seen people use the framework in a variety of different ways. I did want to mention a couple of other things related to the framework that might be appealing to your listeners. One is that all of the student learning outcomes are mapped to Bloom's taxonomy. So for some schools, that's really important. For other schools, they don't care. But that was something that our community felt was very important. And then also, probably very interesting to your listeners, and I did actually listen to one of your podcast episodes about your guest speaker who was from ABET. Every one of our learning outcomes is mapped to the 7 student outcomes listed in Criterion 3 for ABET accreditation approval. So there's symbology, there's iconography in the framework. So there's an orange circle, just like you see with ABET, and then in parentheses at the end of the learning outcomes, you'll be able to understand which of the ABET student outcomes would be achieved if your students achieve that outcome in their classroom. It's also mapped to UN SDGs, in particular number 12. Again, we have an icon that is represented within the framework. And number 12 was important for us to highlight because that's the sustainable development goal that's most associated with engineering. It's about responsible consumption and production. So again, just with the framework, like I said, it's not prescriptive. Pick and mix however you want. Some people take a single learning outcome and integrate it into their course. Existing courses, ideally on core courses, it's easier to do that, and it's also more impactful if it's into core courses. Some people actually reverse engineers reverse engineer their learning outcomes. So they take their syllabus and see what learning outcome they already have, and then they go to our EOP framework and say, oh, if I just tweak this this learning outcome a slight bit, then I would achieve the EOP framework learning outcome as well as the ABAT learning outcome. And then also, I do want to share that some people have used the EOP framework to actually create brand new entire degrees. So there's a program now, Sustainable Systems Engineering in Canada, and there's now a multidisciplinary project-based degree based here actually in Montana. And they weren't funded at all to use this. They were doing it on their own. So our second approach, so I mentioned there were several approaches. I'll just shift over. Oh, actually, before I shift over, I do want to tell you about our companion teaching guides. I forgot to tell you about that. So we have 3 Engineer for One Planet companion teaching guides. The first is a comprehensive guide to teaching the core learning outcomes. So basically what ended up happening is when we launched the EOP framework back in 2020, people were like, this is amazing. This is what we need to teach our students. But how do we do it? We don't know how to do it. Because a lot of engineers are, as we talked about, haven't been trained in sustainability. So we've worked really hard to try and make this as easy as humanly possible for faculty. And so the comprehensive guide takes every core learning outcome listed in the EOP framework and shares links to freely available resources. So that includes videos, examples of student work, reading materials, question prompts, all these sorts of things that you can take directly into your classrooms for free. You don't need to have a login. You don't need to have a license. Everything's for free. And then our other, and that guide is really meant for people that maybe already have their toe dipped into sustainability. The second guide is called the Quick Start Activity Guide. And what we did with that was just take one core learning outcome for each of the 9 different topic areas, and we dove into one example really deeply. So it literally says, this activity will take you 6 minutes. This is what you can do with your students. Or this activity will take 2 hours. This is what you can do with your students. And then lastly, another companion teaching guide we have is called the 13 step-by-step ideas for integrating sustainability into core engineering courses. And that was created because people were like, well, give us some examples of real engineering courses and how to do this. And so you can go to each one of these guides, you can go right to the material selection part of the guide, and you can see specific examples of how it's been integrated. So I'm just going to shift gears quickly and get into those two other approaches that we're using, because I think it'll be interesting for your listeners. So our second approach is to support faculty change efforts. And we do that really through 3 tiers of funding. We have catalytic seed grants, institutionalization grants to help with more deep and long-lasting change. And then we also now have co-funding to propagate change at the national scale. And so some examples of that your listeners can get involved with is we have a partnership with the American Society for Engineering Education, or ASEE. It's called the EOP Mini Grant Program. It's only $8,000, but faculty also receive mentorship and a community of practice. And it's over only 7-month period. And we just launched our 3rd cohort yesterday, and with 18 new schools. And people, if they're interested in that, they can just Google ASEE EOP Mini Grant Program. It'll take you to the page, and the next application will be this fall. And then really wanted to tell you about our National Science Foundation partnership. It's called the NSF and Lemelson EOP partnership, and it's for US-based schools, and it's to support the integration of sustainability into engineering education. There's a rolling deadline, so you can apply for this at any time over the next 3 years at least. And you can if you Google that, you'll find the Dear Colleague letter, and you'll find the NSF program officer that will respond to your questions related to it. And then lastly, we have recently launched an award, because we know recognition is important for what people are doing. And so it's called the ABET and Lemelson EOP Innovation in Sustainability Award. It's an international award. It comes with $10,000 prize. It's for any ABET accredited STEM program. It doesn't have to be just engineering. And we just closed the nominations in April, but it will be open again next year. So by April 20th next year. And we've learned a lot along the way. And one of the things that we've learned is that we also need to bring people together. People are looking for opportunities to work together and make change, not just in their individual classrooms. So our third approach is activating and supporting collaboration. And we do that mostly through our EOP network. We launched this in 2021, and now we have nearly 100 participants. It's cross sectors, disciplines. So we have people from all different stripes of engineering, as well as industry, nonprofits, government. From academia, we have students and faculty and deans, and the list goes on. But it's a volunteer action network, and it really is about having the participants decide what they want to do to advance sustainability in engineering education. And we definitely need more students and deans and material scientists. So please let us know if you're interested in joining that. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions related to what we're doing.
Well, I have two follow-up thoughts right away. The first is that last year at the ASEE National Conference, I actually got to participate in one of the Engineering for One Planet, community design activities to build new EOP content. And I almost didn't know what I was doing at first. I'm like, what's happening here exactly? What have I wandered into? But as the time went on and I realized, I'm helping to build something with other people that's going to be, distributed and used and hopefully interact with students. It was a very cool experience. And that was how I discovered EOP in the first place. So I don't know if that's how people usually get into this, but that was my road into it.
Tim, I just need to say, that's really cool. And that actually is the 13 step-by-step activities or ideas that I just mentioned, that guide, that was actually produced in basically in a 45-minute session at the Interdivisional Town Hall at the SWE conference last year. So if you were there, you were one of the contributors, and you're one of the 94 people that's a part of this.
Yep. My name is on that list. And then my second thought, I was hoping to take a couple minutes and maybe talk through a brief example of implementation. So let's say someone is saying, all right, I've got this class and I want to use some content from EOP. In my case, here's my example. I'm teaching a freshman introduction to engineering course, very broad. But this particular course, I do have a lot of material selection content in it. And I've done different things, collecting historical case studies, doing hypothetical examples, talking to friends in industry to get their stories. But even so, I always feel just the need for more content, more examples, more activities to do. And really what I've discovered I need something very introductory, like here's your first material selection project ever, and getting started at that very, very basic level. So as me being a faculty member who's saying, all right, I want this resource. I know my class. I know my learning objective. Where do I go? How do I find and get the thing to try to use it? So how do I do that?
Yeah, great question. I know, and a lot of this would be easier if we could show you visually. But so I'll try to walk you through what you would do. So you could go to our website, to the resources page, and then you would download our EOP framework. And within that framework, as I mentioned, there's the 9 topic areas. And I would say, in your case, go immediately to the materials selection topic area. And then you're going to see a list of core learning outcomes as well as advanced learning outcomes. You could then do what I was talking about, reverse engineering, kind of match your outcome to maybe one that's in there, or slightly tweak your existing learning outcome to what is in the EOP framework for, this alignment to sustainability. But then as for what to actually do, how to actually put this into your classroom beyond the outcome, I would suggest taking a look at our different guides. So as I just mentioned, you could go to the comprehensive guide in this case, and then every one of those core learning outcomes listed in material selection will actually walk you through an activity. And then with the quick start guide, we dive into one really quickly. I'm actually just going to open it up right now and see what it says for material selection. So they've picked, for this guide, we've picked core learning outcome number 6. And it's all about selecting materials for design alternatives and trade-offs that enable a long functional lifetime, that have net zero greenhouse gas emissions and impact, either minimal or no environmental or social harm, or are restorative to social, cultural, and environmental ecosystems. And so that's the learning outcome. And we actually have examples of what you can do in your classroom. So for people that are just starting, so say for you're like, oh, it's intro, we want to really start at the beginning. There's an activity here that takes 8 minutes only. And there are 3 different videos that you can watch, and they're professional grade videos. They're actually produced by the Autodesk Sustainability Workshop Series. So the first one is about green materials, how to select non-toxic building materials. So it's a quick video. They're really fun. They have a lot of interactivity. The next video is about environmental properties of materials and in material selection. And then the third video that's there is physical properties of materials and based on material selection. So that's just like 3 really quick, fun, professional videos you could show your students and maybe start a conversation about something they're interested in related to material selection. If you had more time, again, in this quick start activity guide, it says there's an activity 1 to 4 hours. If you have more time, have them review the content above, and then there's a specific exercise they have you walk through, and you have 4 different steps, like decide on the material that your product that you're going to replace. So basically, I would be choosing a product that maybe everybody has in their dorm room or everybody has in their classroom, and saying, okay, if this is the product, what's one material in this product that we want to try to replace that would be more, it would be better for the environment or better for people that are working in plants, for example. And so then they want you to go and explore materials libraries to actually look for different types of alternative materials. And we have all these resources listed in the guide where you can actually click into another website that takes you to all these different materials resources guides. They help you find, then you're like, okay, look for price quotes, because we know, like, if something's going to be drastically more expensive, it's not going to fly for that company. So we need to talk about the financial aspect. And then you have their students document your findings. So that's an activity that can take like 1 to 4 hours, but you could take it a number of different directions, and it's a great little starting place. I did want to say that a lot of the resources that we have accessed in our guides go to a website that I would love to share with your listeners. That's called Tools for Design and Sustainability. It's basically a green design textbook online. And it's housed by VentureWell, which is a nonprofit that I used to work for. They bring innovation and entrepreneurship into higher ed, and they've been funded by the Lemelson Foundation for 25 years. So if you take a look at those resources too, you can go a lot deeper. So I don't know if that helps you out, but that's just an example of how you can use these resources.
It's funny, I was just looking at the website, and I found the VentureWell site they have a nice thing on finding greener materials. And then they give you just examples. And what struck me was exactly what you said. They also bring in the financial part. And that's actually a really important part, because a friend of mine once gave a talk, and he's CEO of a company right now, but he started his talk by saying, was it Thomas Hardy or someone said once that the bourgeoisie are people who know the price of everything and the value of nothing. And he said that's important because material scientists are the opposite. We all know the value of everything and the price of nothing because we don't really cover that in our materials programs. But it's critical we change our ways and start to understand that. So I love that, they bring this up, step 1, decide on a material in your product to replace. Then step 2, explore materials libraries or other resources to find exciting green materials. And then number 3, get price quotes. Because if you don't do that right away, you've missed the whole point. Because if it, and we all know there's lots of ways to make plastics recyclable. No problem. Too bad it costs too much and no one's going to do it. Right? That's the central problem that we have to solve is cost. So this is fantastic. And Probably takes a little while for someone to play around with your website to figure out exactly how to use it for their case. But I really urge all of the listeners to do this. And the other thing I want to point out in the your comprehensive guide to teaching, if you go right to the material selection, you right away show the EduPack software that Mike Ashby developed. And they say right away it's expensive software. But what they don't say is almost all engineering schools in America have already bought a site-wide license for this software. So most of our educational institutions actually have access to it. And Mike was super passionate about putting in the sustainability modules. And they have case studies where you can look at what's better, a plastic bag or a paper bag, or what's better, a glass bottle, much easier to recycle glass, or a plastic bottle. And the answers are often very surprising. And with Mike's analysis, you quickly realize plastic is way better, not because of the recycling issue, but the energy cost for transporting the product to market. Glass is heavy, really heavy, and it wipes out all the savings. So it's, again, we're having our North American Materials Education Symposium this summer in Ann Arbor, and I hope someone from EOP comes and talks and will help our community learn how to use these things. But it's especially important to realize that our entire community, this whole North American Education Symposium, was started by Mike Ashby. It was started by Mike Ashby and his company Granta, which built the EduPack, and it was bought by ANSYS, and there's going to be a workshop on how to use the EduPack at our conference. So I feel we would be a very good partner for EOP, because we were sort of, our whole educational focus really has been sustainability through the vision of Mike Ashby. So hopefully we'll be able to leverage that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that you said. You brought up some great points. And, related to the financial piece, we talk a lot about when we're talking about Engineer for One Planet, we talk a lot about environmental and social sustainability. And we focus on that because we know that when people get into, when they're working for industry, that the bottom line, economic bottom line, is normally what drives every decision. And so what we're trying to do is help students understand that it's really a triple bottom line. Like, of course, you need to be thinking about the financial aspects, but please also understand and know how to critically think and measure trade-offs and make these difficult decisions, and raise your voice to say something that's important to say to your companies or wherever you end up working about all these different aspects. I really think the secret to sustainability is that it is truly about critical thinking and problem solving. There's no one solution that fits every single problem. There's no one solution that fits every single region. What works in Montana won't work in Minnesota, or won't work in Florida, or won't work in Africa, So I think it's really important for our students to really understand that they, with the right training, they have the power to really help make the best decisions for whomever they end up working for, or if they're working for themselves. One other thing I wanted to mention about these resources, that in the comprehensive guide, everything is referenced in the back of the guide. And it is a great starting place too. Like, say you don't really know where to start related to sustainability. You don't want to pick one of the topic areas and dive down deeply. You can actually just go to that reference list and rip that out if you want. And then you'll have a whole long list of amazing sustainability focused resources that you can play with and dig into. So there's a lot of ways to use our resources. And again, like I said, they're in the Creative Commons, so just use them however you want. Don't feel like you need to follow a certain recipe. And then last thing I want to say about the Tools for Design and Sustainability site related to the Granta EduPack or ANSYS. Great software, but I'm not here to promote any one company. We definitely try to stay away from that. But I will say, on that Tools for Design and Sustainability website that I mentioned through VentureWell, there is a section within that site that's called Measuring Impact. And within that, they dive into all these different materials and resources and examples of student work for LCA. And so for life cycle analysis, a lot of engineering programs, they introduce it at the beginning, or maybe they don't at all. But the resources that we have on that site are really great for the first foray. So there's a Excel spreadsheet that students can actually use that's populated with up-to-date materials, guide, resources, so that they can get real actual numbers and plug them in and understand the impacts of choosing different materials. So you don't have to have fancy software. You don't, not every school has licenses to these LCA software programs, and so, take that LCA spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet, leverage it however you can. We're trying to reach as many students, as many faculty as possible, and make it as freely available and easy to use as possible.
Wow, this would be great for the teachers' camps, Tim. Because high schools.
Yeah, use it however you want.
And the fact that it's a spreadsheet that students can actually see what's the math that I'm doing, how am I calculating my answers? It's not a magical black box handing you solutions. It's data that you have to work with and understand and interpret. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I really
I do
love
have to
it
put on my moderator hat, though.
Oh yeah, keep
and
going.
say, the clock is ticking, and I'm going to reel us back on script just a little bit because I need to give you the chance, Cindy, to brag about how awesome EOP is in terms of impacts, right? How many people have you reached? How successful has the program been? But also, where is it going? Like, what's the exciting new thing that we need to look forward to with EOP?
Well, thank you for giving me a chance to brag a little bit about what we've done. And honestly, we don't have great numbers. We're not doing a great job at tracking because everything is for free, and we don't want people to have to put in an email or to create an account to download things. So we know that people are using these resources that are not part of our grantees system, but we don't have numbers for that. But I can tell you about what we do know based on the people that we have been helping to fund to do this work. And so now we have over 1,000 community members, more than 400 collaborative stakeholders that have contributed to the various different resources. We've had 34 EOP grantees, and we just launched 18 more yesterday. And so with the funding that we know from those 30 plus schools so far, we know we've reached 10 minority serving institutions, including 3 HBCUs, which is really important to us. We've reached nearly 200 faculty. The EOP framework has been integrated into nearly 300 courses, and we know we've reached over 15,000 students. So that's what we do know based on just the grants that we've been giving out and the support that we've been giving through EOP. But like I said, everything is available for free online. And so we turn up at conferences, like when I met Steve at the ABET symposium. He was one of the people that raised his hand and said, hey, I've been looking at this and trying to use it. And Steve will probably recollect that there was somebody in the audience that stood up, I believe she was from Clemson University, to say she's used these materials to completely overhaul her entire automotive degree. And I didn't know this person, or the resources. So that's a little bit about our impact. As for where we're going in the future, it's a great question, and really we're focused on our 3 interrelated approaches, and we're going to continue with those. But we're really always listening to our community. So if our community is saying we really need to move in a specific direction, we will be considering that strongly, and we'll move in that direction however we can, as long as we're still continue to stay on task with our 3 interrelated approaches. But our whole point is to scale and to help influence the systems change. So I don't have one specific, here's an exciting thing to look for coming down the pike. We're just constantly making incremental changes and one step in front of the other, and working with our community members. There are lots of ways, though, people can get involved. Can I tell you about that?
Please do.
Okay, because I know we're running out of time here. But there are a bunch of different ways that people can, in your community, can absolutely get connected to us right away, and then we can just see where it goes from there. Number one, of course, download and use and share the online resources that we've been talking about today. Tell your peers about EOP. If you know somebody that's interested in sustainability and you think they'd be interested, tell them about this website, tell them about these resources. You can become a signatory if you're interested in sustainability and you're committed to this, whatever that means to you in your world. On our website, we have a signatory page, which is just a chance for people to say, yeah, count me in. I'm part of your community and I'm doing what I can to advance sustainability integration into engineering education. And then the two last things I'll say, both you can find out on our website, but number one, we are in LinkedIn. If you're a LinkedIn user, we do have an EOP page. It's a great place. If you follow us, it's a great way to get the breaking news. So if we have a new granting opportunity or if we know of something that's related to what you're doing, we'll be sharing that. We post several times a week. So that's something for you to get an easy way to get involved. And then also we have an EOP newsletter, which we send out about quarterly. We don't spam anyone. You can sign up on our website, and that's just a great way to see what events we're going to be at, granting opportunities, what new resources are being launched, anything that's open for the community to get involved with, we share through that newsletter. So I will stop there.
That's great. I just looked at your signatories page, and I see Bosco U is one of the people listed there. And Go is one of the members of our organizing committee for our meeting, and we've done a podcast with Bosco, so maybe Bosco would be a good person to talk to. Anyway, this has been absolutely fantastic. I want to thank you so much for being on with us today. I have a feeling that this episode might have more impact than many of our other episodes on the actual, affecting change to the materials community, because I think there's wide agreement amongst our community that this is a very important topic for us as materials educators. So thank you very much, and I think we'll end it. Anything else, Tim, before we close off?
No, I think that's all. Cindy, thanks just once again for coming and spending this time with us. It's been a great conversation, really informative. And I guess to everyone else out there, we'll see you next time on the next episode of Undercooled.
See you later.
Thank you.